The Powers Project.
Trish, how are you today, young lady?
I'm doing great, Kurt. How about yourself?
I'm doing great as well. It's great to have you on the show. You're going to be talking on a topic today that's very near and dear to my heart because uh, this May, 3 years ago, this May, I had a very dear friend of mine who took his life. And so please forgive me. I will do my best not to get choked up over this. But every chance I have to have someone like you on the show to help people who deal with depression and suicidal thoughts and things of that nature, I want to have you on here because if you help one person, if one person watches this and gets help from this,
Mhm.
I will be thankful for it because I know that what you talk about is so needed because of what people go through in particular today, and with this
Mhm.
pandemic. I think more and more people than ever before are dealing with depression. And so if you would tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about, you're the founder of Build Yourself Back Up. Tell us about that and what you do exactly.
Okay, that sounds great. So I was quite young when I realized that I was suffering with depression. I was about 13 years old. I knew prior to 13 that something wasn't right. I was always feeling sad, drained, didn't want to be around people, hated school, and it progressively got worse. When I went to my mom at 13 and told her that I was really sad and I didn't want to live anymore, I unfortunately didn't get the opportunity to heal myself. So I spent the next 20 years building on top of my depression and building on top of my depression. And in my early 30s, I couldn't do it anymore. I had enough. So I got help. I got a therapist. She changed my world. It took 7 months with her for me to find my power and my voice, start standing up for myself, start respecting myself and being treated with respect. And it started to just go from there. And I would seek out books and podcasts and people to help me keep leveling up. And I had this vision of this woman. I'm like, that's who I want to become. I never looked out to other people saying, I want to be that person because that person's already doing them. I want to be me. So it's always looking at the next level me as my inspiration. And I kept growing and growing. And so I built Build Yourself Back Up as a platform to talk about mental health, anxiety, depression, all of the emotions, how to get out and manage yourself and all of the feelings that you feel, and live life still with joy and creativity and always wanting to change for the better.
Okay, all right. So let me ask you just a couple questions here. So you were 13 when you realized something wasn't right. Now, from what you just described, it sounded like that you had this depression because of your environment, where I know many people, they feel like their depression comes from within. It's not necessarily their environment, because I know people who have the perfect environment. They have people who love them, who are supportive of them, and yet they still suffer from this depression. But do you
Mhm.
think yours was entirely because of your environment? And what did you, so you told your mom at 13 that you no longer want to live. I mean, what did she say? Did she not try to help you, find help or something, or?
So, what happened in the situation with me going to my mom at 13, I got to have one meeting with a counselor. I told her what was happening at home, mostly about with my stepdad. And after the session, she called my mom into the room. And when they finished, we left, and my mom yelled at me all the way home for telling the truth. And I never got to go back. So my stepdad was emotionally, psychologically, and sometimes physically abusive. And yeah, my depression came from my environment. And as I got older, I mean, I had some really great things happen in my life. I've got two amazing kids. I had a home that it was my dream home, and I got to live in it for about 8 years. A lot of great things. And I was still depressed. And the reason for it was everything that happened in my childhood followed me to my adulthood. And I couldn't get away from the thoughts, the memories, the limiting beliefs of you're stupid, you're ugly, you're dumb, we don't like you. All of that that I heard as a child, I believed it. And when I became an adult, that was my foundation at that time. That was what supported me because that's all I knew. No one taught me anything different. But when I had my epiphany, my big moment of realization that I'm the creator of my life. I'm making this happen. I'm thinking these thoughts and I'm generating the physical creation of it. So when I changed my thoughts and I started loving myself, my outside world became calm, fun, adventurous, filled with opportunity and people that actually care for me. But there was a lot of limiting beliefs and mindset that had to be taken care of first.
Um, I had a guest on just a week or two ago. Her name was Celia Kibler, and she's the author of a book called Raising Happy Toddlers. And it's funny that you discuss about limiting beliefs because she said oftentimes parents don't even realize that they're limiting their children's beliefs because when their child does something wrong, they tell them, "Oh, you're doing something wrong. You're doing this wrong." Yet when they
Mhm.
do it right, they never say anything about, "Oh, good job, you did it right." So these kids grow up believing everything they do is wrong. And
Yeah.
it's, and it's such, and when you think about that, you have such power over these children that you're raising, and you raised them with these limiting beliefs that they're only bad, that they're only, that they're stupid or whatever. And it's like you need to be more careful with how you speak to your children, how you act around your children. And so you
Mhm.
grew up with this, with, and here's the thing. I know that there's no, you know guidebook that comes with being a parent.
Yes.
Goodness, I mean, you would think before you have children that you would go, one, I want children, and we're not just having them for the sake of having them. And I want to raise these children to be the best that they can possibly be and give them the best life possible. But that's not what parents do often.
I would agree with you, Kurt, on that. And also, the kids, they mimic the people that
Mm.
surround them. So if we as adults are showing up poorly, what do we expect? And then we get angry at our children for showing up poorly, which is just harping on them even more.
Right.
And I am a victim, not a, well, I was a victim as a child, but I'm also the reverse. And at the first few years of my children's life, I didn't show up the way I should have. I recognize it now. I was showing up with what I was taught as a child. And again, over 5 years ago, when I had my big shift, I realized that I'm hindering my children. I got to change first. They'll watch the changes and they'll show up differently. And that's exactly what that happened. I had zero emotional intelligence. I cried about everything. I flipped out about everything. And I did it in front of my kids, and my son started to mimic me. And then I would punish him for doing so. And then when I had my realization, I had tremendous guilt. I started watching him change as I was changing, and I started praising him. And when I praised him, he expanded and grew faster. He became more confident. He had more creativity. He had more everything. And I'm like, this works. This method works, and I'm not stopping.
That's amazing. And it's amazing that you were able to see that vicious cycle continuing with you, and you took and you stopped it. I mean, that's the only way that these things get better, is when we realize that it's not our kids' fault for doing what they see us doing. It's our fault for setting a bad example, and we never blame ourselves. We always blame, we're like, how is it that, because we think of ourselves as being perfect when we were kids. And it's like, yeah, and pretty much
Yeah.
not. So, and so when we see our kids behaving a certain way and we don't ask, well, why are they behaving that way? Maybe because they got it from us.
Yeah.
And so you you make such a great point, in that the only way to break that cycle is to look within yourself and see what you're doing, and start from there. So you
Yeah.
went to this therapist, and this was like, obviously years later, 20 plus years later, that you went to this therapist. And so what was it that this therapist was able to get you to understand that, I mean, to look within yourself to see that, where the cycle began and how it was, as you would, continuing with you?
Yeah. So I went to her because the Christmas before, I had a situation with my mother-in-law, and it put me into a downward spiral of emotion. So I sought help because I actually hit rock bottom with my emotions because of that situation. And when I expressed myself to my therapist about what was happening, she got me to recognize that I'm allowing it, but it's also not to be allowed. That is poor behavior. But I didn't have evidence or history showing me what good behavior looked like. I accepted poor behavior as a child from my stepdad and my mom and my siblings. So, of course, I'm going to accept it from my in laws. That's what happened. She got me to have the awareness that you deserve better. And so I started to notice that when I was expressing myself, I felt lighter after. It was like I no longer was thinking about it as much. It didn't bother me at night and I couldn't sleep. Like things were getting better on that side of it. So the more and more I expressed, the more I had room in my mind to actually think of things that mattered instead of stuff from the past or fear about the future. It was like, why are we unhappy now? What do we need to do next to get to where we want to go? You have mastered depression, so let's change it. But I also had this limiting belief that I'm done. Like life's over. What's the point of changing? It's going to take forever. It took a good solid 3 years before I really flipped things around and it started to, the momentum was like increasing and getting better and better faster. But it took a good solid 3 years. So that was the whole cycle that got me to where I needed to make the bigger changes.
Well, there's a couple things that you said, and one is with the limiting beliefs. You also talk about, when parents give you this limiting belief, of course, it's going to affect your self esteem, your self image, how you feel
Yeah.
about yourself, and so, and you carried this on into your adult life, where you said you had zero emotional maturity, basically, and I find that in a lot of adults, they can be the most intelligent people on the earth, and yet emotionally they're children still. They have no emotional maturity whatsoever because they were never taught to have it. And so, obviously that's a big part of your ability to heal yourself, is to understand things from an emotional point of view, and look at it differently than you would someone who had no maturity at all.
Yeah, exactly. I think emotional intelligence is one of the big areas to create for yourself if you don't have it. And then the leveling up that comes from it is exactly what we need for this planet, exactly what we need for our children. And I find it interesting that the older generations are always pointing the finger at the younger generation saying, well, you're the reason for this and you're the reason for this. But we should be looking at the older generation saying, well, you're the ones that taught us.
Yeah.
So just something different.
Do you notice that the older generation is always about, and this was even my generation, and even or before my parents' generation, and then my generation's doing the same thing, where they go, you just need to toughen up. You're too big of a wimp. You let everything get to you. Quit being a little baby. Toughen up. That's their answer to everything.
Yeah. And I totally agree on that. I was raised in a household where kids were to be seen and not heard. So I got the clothing, the food, the shelter, but if I spoke, it was zip it. Like no feelings were to be shared, no, nothing to be talked about. And when I speak about depression, anxiety to audiences, I always make note at the fact that men have it actually harder than women in regards to expressing, because you're taught to suck it up, be a man, don't show your emotions. But I'm telling people now the only way, and I'm going to say it again, the only way to get out of depression and anxiety is to start expressing yourself.
I agree. Yeah, and the men who are able to express themselves tend to be much healthier than those who don't, because it's so easy, because you are expected to act and be a man. And so anything other than sucking it up, like you said, and just putting on that stern face, like I can handle anything, is looked as upon as being less than a man. And
Mhm,
it's hurt a lot of men because they're afraid to express themselves because they feel like they can't. And I'm a person
mhm,
who I express myself very confidently, very easily, because I know that acting that way is harmful to us. And
mhm,
it's nothing more than a facade anyway. And we can't grow, as you said. You can't grow when you're in that mindset of just, oh, I need to suck it up and just be a man.
yeah.
And the old adage of what, what a man is, or what we believe a man is. And that's not
Mhm.
to say that, you cry about every little thing either, but still, I mean, but there's a balance there,
Mhm,
and I think people know where that balance is and where it should be.
mhm,
You talk about conquering depression, which is something I hadn't heard before, because I thought depression was always something people lived with. You're talking about actually conquering it. Now,
mhm.
have you had any pushback from, let's say, the psychologists or psychiatrists who say, oh, you need medication to deal with depression? Are you on Is that something that you is part of what you do for to conquer depression, or you've said, no, this is how I do it, it's by knowing who I am and seeing myself the way I truly am, instead of the way I was taught to look at myself?
Mhm. When I started my therapy, I did go on antidepressants. I went on for about 8 months. I only noticed a small shift in how I was feeling. I started to recognize that doing the work, expressing myself, getting new tools, getting rid of old habits, doing the work was actually causing me to have more success than the medication itself. So I did stop it. Um, I'm not really one to say if it's good or bad. I mean, it did help me for a short period of time, but when I started working on myself, like we talked about the inward, outward, when we start looking in and start really focusing on the areas that are traumatized and there's hindrance, we will absolutely open up, expand, and grow from that point.
So during this point that you're talking about, you also spoke about a spiritual awakening. Now, what do you mean by that exactly?
I started to recognize I had a bigger awareness of life. My spirituality started to grow, and I recognized that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We're here to express ourselves, to have adventure, to learn stuff, to experience. And when we pass on, we lose our physical body and our soul goes back. And so I started recognizing that this was an experience that I came to conquer because I chose, I volunteered for it. And then I started recognizing the laws of attraction, that if I put out a thought or put out energy on something, it will come back to me that way. So if it's bad, negative, I'm going to get that back threefold. But if I switch the way that I'm thinking and I put out happy thoughts, positive, optimistic, loving thoughts and actions, I'm going to get that in return. So as I started working on the emotional side, my spiritual side started to expand. And then I merged the two together and started co-creating with the universe and making my dreams come true. So it was the awakening to the truth of why we're here and taking on those lessons and moving forward with them.
I have to tell you, I'm a big believer in what you put out to the universe comes back. I've seen it in my own life so many times, and so you're absolutely right. And it's when I see things not going right in my life, I go, okay, what am I doing here? Rather than blaming the world and saying, oh, the world's out to get me or whatever, I go, what am I doing? What am I putting out there? And if I take a step back and look at what I'm doing, I'm putting something out there I didn't even realize. And I go, oh, I need to stop that. so,
Mhm. Yes.
so,
And it's the same that when you put out the positive, what comes back to you? I find it so interesting. I also notice that when negative things are happening, if I pull back and observe the situation for the whole picture, I recognize that there's a deep lesson there,
right.
something that I need to see for myself, something that I need to change. There's something there. Maybe that it was things didn't go the way I wanted, but I also believe that rejection is redirection. When things are, you're having resistance or challenges, you need to stop and question it. That's your soul and your body's way of telling you this isn't the path, or you need to see something here. And when you acknowledge it and you figure it out and you find and redirect yourself, you're back on track and things are back in flow and quite easy.
That's that's such a great point. I'm going to tell you because I spent the first half of my life um, fighting against something that because I believed this was the path, and even though the universe kept trying to show me, no, this is not the path, I kept
Yeah.
going on that path. And it took half my life to go. And when I finally stopped and did what I was supposed to do, all of a sudden it just like the heavens opened up, and I
Yeah.
was like, and they're like, "What took you so long?" It's like, well, I'm stubborn, I guess. I don't. Um, you also said something about it, which I thought was extremely powerful. You said that people stay where they are out of fear. And I find that to be so true. And so I want you to elaborate a little bit on that. But I want to say this. I've said for many years now, anytime you do anything out of fear, you will always have regret. It's going to be so much worse than anything else that you could imagine had you pushed for it or done what you thought you should have done. Fear just you'll always have regret if you do things based on fear.
Mhm. I find that fear is actually a really good navigator. Fear shows up because you are about to conquer a lesson. And if you can push past the fear, you will no longer be afraid of what it was.
Right.
People sit in fear because they're afraid of failure or being embarrassed or things going this way and not this way, or they don't see it, or the unknown frightens them. So they don't move past the fear. The fear is only physical. We only feel it in our body. It's not external. I mean, yes, if you're going to bungee jump, you might have fear that the rope might break. That's a different situation. But if you want to change your career, but you're afraid that you might have to start at the bottom, so what?
Right.
Reorganize your life, make it work for you. If it's going to make you happy, if you're going to learn more and expand more, the universe is going to support those positive changes and you will get what you need along your path. But what it is fear will is the point where the lesson is starting. Can you move through the lesson? Can you get through the fear? Because when you do, on the other side, it's much easier and much brighter.
Right. Exactly. And
Yeah.
and that's the thing. It's like, I know, like, for instance, I use a lot of physical analogies when I talk about things, but I go, I remember when I was a kid, and the biggest fear, like to get into a fight, was getting punched in the nose. And then one day I was just, I'm not going to run anymore. I'm not going to be fearful anymore. And what I discovered was getting punched in the nose didn't hurt anywhere near as bad as running away and being cowardly, because
Mhm.
the nose will heal. The psyche of being a coward does never heals. And so while you might get a bloody nose in the beginning, that will heal and things will change. And that's what I found happened. And not that I got a bloody nose, I'm just using that as an example. But the fear of the things that we fear are always much worse in their head than what they are in real life. Do
Yeah.
you found that to be the truth?
Absolutely. I put myself in so many moments where I was about to jump ship. I keep telling myself you have to say yes to opportunity and you'll know when something's not right. And there were so many moments where I'm like, I'm going to jump ship. I'm going to jump ship. And I was like, no, you're not. You're going to show up. You're a reliable woman. And I do. And I have the best time, or I create the best projects, or something comes that just gives me pride and joy. And it helps me more in my confidence and self-esteem. And then the fear of what I did is gone. And anytime something like that happens again, I'm not sitting in the fear. I'm ready to tackle it because I know it's going to be okay.
Right. Now, I'm going to say, with your childhood and what you described it as, there's something that came out of your childhood positively from what I can see, and that is you seem to be very resilient, and not everybody's as resilient as you are. And I think that you're a fighter, and that obviously, if you didn't want to live at 13 and you made it into your 30s, that doesn't happen for everybody, because not everybody's a fighter. Not everyone's as resilient as you were, able to make it to there and then find the help that you needed. So something happened in your childhood, I would say. I mean, you please tell me if I'm right or wrong, if that made you the person you are today.
I would say that it was a multiple moments in my childhood that got me to have that resilience and the ability to just conquer the road ahead, stay focused and strong. When I'm a third daughter from my mom and my dad. I don't have a relationship with my dad. My mom raised us. And by the time I came, my mom was 25. She divorced when I was 3 years old. And I think she kind of gave up. I think she kind of gave up on parenting. She was just done. She, was tired, was angry, was depressed herself. So I had to teach myself a lot on my own. I taught myself how to cook. I taught myself how to do laundry. I did a lot of things for myself. And because of that, I think that it helped me become more independent. And when you're independent, you have resilience because you rely on yourself. You're not relying on external sources that might fall through and then all of a sudden you're hooped. You rely on yourself. You become resourceful. You become mindful of stuff. And that's what it was I had to always be thinking outside the box to figure out how to make my next move because I was doing things on my own. When I got into my relationship that turned into a marriage, I did the reverse. I actually became quite needy. I needed a validation. I needed support. I needed everything. And that, I think, was why my depression got really bad in my marriage, was because I stopped focusing on being an individual and I can do this on my own. I was relying on my husband and other people to fill my cup up. But yeah, that would probably be the biggest thing, is doing it all on my own.
So, okay, so how many siblings do you have?
I've got two. So I have two older
All right,
sisters.
two older sisters. How did they turn out? Did they go through the things that you went through, or have they, and if so, have they conquered them as well, or where are they at?
I would say that they're still sitting in the life that I used to live. There's some addictions there. There's a lot of mental health and parenting issues and stuff like that. And I don't have strong relationships with them, basically because of there was never a relationship to begin with.
Right.
So as I view their experience, it's all what I went through. And I've tried to help one sister get out of where she is. I think the hardest thing, and I think this is a really big point to talk about, is putting in the work to make the change happen. And I tried to help my one sibling, and the work was too much. And it's the fear that's holding us back. So we already talked about that. But when we do the work, when we actually put in the effort and we make the changes, that's where everything starts to get better. And people don't want to put in the work because it doesn't feel good. It's
Right.
super uncomfortable. There's no guarantee. There's no design path. You have to go find all of it yourself to make it, and we have resources, but you have to actually put the effort in to make it
Right.
happen.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, what do you think? And I don't know that you'll have an answer because I've given this question a lot of thought myself and I still don't have an answer. But we can look at children growing up in an environment, and there's always that one child who will rise up out of that environment, who will not become like their parents, not do the things that their parents did, but actually rise above that. And yet all the other siblings seem to get trapped in there. It's like, what is it that makes those people, those kids, those amazing kids who are able to rise up out of their environment and be more than what they've been taught or what they've been shown, compared to those who get stuck there?
I'm going to say that my perspective of that is that when it's a one child out of multiple that's making the change, I notice that it's often the youngest out of the bunch.
Mm,
And I believe that the reason for that is because we are clearing away family traumas from history, right? Like our grandparents. The cycle has been going for so long, so we are breaking a huge cycle. So when you have one child out of the family that makes the change, then it shows the rest of the family that the change is possible, especially if the person's younger than them. Oh, they've already done it, well, I can do it too, right? I have more experience, I've got more maturity, or whatever it is, I can do it too. And when we start witnessing one person make the change, then the rest of the change will happen in the family. And that happened with my mom, and that happened with my kids, and that happened with some of my friends that watched me. And then they would seek out my advice. I'd give it to them and I said, I can give you everything that I've done, but you have to put in the work. And the relationship I have with my mom now is the relationship I always wanted.
oh,
You
that's
know,
amazing.
we had to have a break off for a while. And then we came back together and we rebuilt our relationship based off of real love and trust. So it's possible.
So your mother actually did the work and wanted that. That's amazing. has
Yes.
she has she attempted to reach out to your sisters and get them to come on board as well?
No, but she does support them, which I think is great. She visits. My one sister doesn't live where we live, so she makes attempts to be around and stuff. But the one thing that I notice about healing and giving advice is often people need to be ready for it.
Right.
They start seeking it. When you're told something, you're not ready for it, you end up getting angry or you feel frustrated because your soul or your body or yourself's not ready for it. So I don't really go to people and say, you should do this, you should do this. I just speak my truth. And when they hear what I'm saying and they like it, it resonates, they start coming to me, and they come to me when they're ready for it.
I agree with you. You're right. You can't force it on anybody when they're not ready for it.
Yeah.
Um, you also said something. My heartbreaking life lessons led me to forgive myself and others. And this is such a powerful point that you make. I cannot tell you that, one of the things I do is I show people how to learn to love themselves. And I think that's a process that you've gone through, of not loving yourself to where now you do love yourself. And that is one of the main things you have to be able to do, is forgive yourself and forgive others. And so when you said that, I was like, wow, she get like, yes, this is the real deal here. So please expand a little bit on that and why it's so important to you, or it was so important to you to be able to forgive yourself and forgive others.
It was important because that is a part of the healing that has to take place. You have to find forgiveness. The way that I found forgiveness, especially for the people in my life that were supposed to be my role models, my mom, my dad, my stepdad, was they weren't taught the right ways to show up. So I can't be angry at them for not knowing better and not knowing there's books and podcasts or people, whatever out there to help them. It was when I had the realization that there are, and I can go and seek all of that, that the change happened. But, when my mom grew up, none of this information was available, or if it wasn't something she was aware of. When I had that perspective, this huge wave of energy just came through me, and it dropped like 100-pound weight off of me. And then also having the perspective that I was showing up as that parent before I had my change. So I had to forgive myself for doing what put me in depression and put me into a place of suicidal thoughts and attempts. That, okay, we can make the changes. When I teach my kids all of what I know, they're going to have children that are going to have this better mindset, this better way of showing up. And that eventually is how we're going to heal the planet and become better people and more loving people, is by generation after generation teaching the right way and showing up the right way.
Again, very, very powerful point. One of the things I've been asked is, because my father and I never had a very good relationship. And people ask me, did you hate your father or do you hate your father? And I said, no, I don't hate him because, as you said, he didn't know any better. And I don't even want to say that. I don't want to say he didn't know better. He had no desire to be better.
Mhm.
And there's just people out there who are very happy, or they think they're happy with being who they are. They have no desire to better themselves, and it's just who they are. And I remember thinking, how did my father get to be this way? Because as a grandchild to my grandfather, I remember seeing my grandfather in a certain light. But when I became an adult, I saw my grandfather for who he really was, and saw how my father became the person he became, and
Mhm.
realized, that the apple didn't fall far from the tree. That my grandfather and father were very much alike, and so, as you said, I couldn't hate him for something that they don't have, the resources that you and I have nowadays. And we also had a desire to better ourselves, and he just didn't. So I can't hate him for anything. I like you said, he provided, the housing, the clothing, the food, but that was about it. He didn't beat us, he wasn't a drunk. So those, which, a lot of people went through far worse than I did. At least I had a father who was there, and while I didn't have much of a relationship with him, he provided the minimal, at least the minimum at least. And so, I'm thankful for that.
Mhm.
And it sounds like your father or your stepfather, when your mother divorced, you were happy that they got divorced, because you said you couldn't imagine what your life would have been like had they not.
Oh, absolutely. I'm grateful that my mom left my dad and my stepdad at the times that they did. With my dad, I believe that I would have picked up an addiction like alcoholism, because I would have watched it day in and day out. So I got to avoid something like that, which to me
Right.
is a great success. Like, but with my stepdad, I mean, I that's where a lot of the negativity came. But when he finally left our life, because after he left, we saw him for maybe 6 months, and that was it, because I was done. I couldn't do it. Um, I had to forgive him for all of that stuff too. But yeah, that relationship completely shifted after everything with my mom and my stepdad and my dad in regards to myself. I had a lot of emotional stuff start coming in. And because when people leave our life, we look back and we're like, oh, if only I did this and only if I did that. And oh, with my stepdad, I wish I would have called 911. I wish I would have fought back. I wish I would have, but and so I had so much stuff come up in regards to those relationships. But if he would have remained in my life, I don't believe I would have had the changes that I have now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, and I don't remember what you called it. I call it transformation through fire, and basically it's taking those steps, those necessary steps to change your life. And like you said, it's ugly, it's hard. I mean, it's something that almost everybody will do anything to escape. They'll go, I'll do anything, just don't make me go through that. But they don't realize what awaits them at the other side. And it's a whole
Mhm.
different person. It's a person that they'll be proud of, a person that they don't won't recognize right now, but when they become that person, they will never go back to being who they were. And it's such a necessary step. How do you get people, how do you convince people that, hey, you, I know this step is hard, I went through it, everybody goes through it, that makes that transformation? How do you convince them that to take the necessary step to do that?
I think that I convince by showing up, just being myself, leading by example. When others see the changes happening and them staying, it gives them evidence and hope that it will happen for them. And by sticking next to them and talking them through it and then giving them all the tools and the process to get out, that in itself will be enough for them to keep going. We have to put in the work to see the results. But when you start seeing the results, you are so on board. I have the evidence that things are getting better. When I go to bed at night and I lie there and it's quiet in my head, that's success. That's worth fighting for and putting in the hard work. When I have a Thanksgiving dinner that happened just recently, and my daughter goes into the kitchen and dropped a cup by accident, and I've got pots of everything going and people talking and stuff, instead of losing my mind because I didn't create that emotional intelligence and self-regulation and being calm and making sure that my daughter was okay, getting things cleaned up and still successfully getting dinner on the table on time, that is evidence that I've worked on myself, that I no longer lose myself in chaotic moments, that I'm standing firm on the foundation that I created. And so when life wants to throw me these curveballs, I don't let it hit me. I grab them and I start running.
There you go.
Yeah.
um so what would you say your children would say about who, you know, their mother now compared to who you were a few years ago?
I love this question. And the reason for that is I recently put together 7 years worth of pictures of my kids on my computer. And so for the last couple of weeks, every couple of nights, we'll put on a slideshow of pictures from 2018. And my daughter looks over at me one night and comments, she goes, we're looking at pictures from 2014. And she goes, Mom, look at that woman and look at you now. She's like, I like the woman now. And it just broke my heart because
Yeah.
she saw the change in only a picture of us when I was deeply depressed to pictures when we're just last year. And she's like, Mom, that those are the moments. Yeah.
Do you choke up all your people
Sorry.
talk to you like this? Wow.
Yeah.
You know, if anybody, any listeners or viewers out there, you have children, I know you're choking up too. There might be some people out there listening that don't have children, but I'm telling you, when your child like can tell you something like that, it really touches your heart. So
And it definitely gives you the evidence that you need.
yes, exactly. And you know, and when there are people out there and you just going, I don't want to go through this, it's too much work, it's too hard. Think, if you have children, think about your children. Now, I know I always teach people to do things for themselves. You've got to do it for yourself. But if you need to think about your children to take that first initial step, then do it, because
Yeah.
you're not just going to better your life. You're going to better your children's life. You're going to better your family's life. You're going to better everyone's life. Because one of the things I show people is like, the relationship you have with yourself affects every relationship that you have in life. And I am a firm believer that everything that is out there is a relationship, whether it's a relationship with your family, a loved one, with your health, with your wealth, your career, whatever. These are all relationships, and they're all affected by how you feel about yourself. So once you're able to find that peace within yourself and love yourself, all these other relationships blossom much more so than they were before. So so put the work in, you know. and do it. And I know it's hard. I've been through it. I had to do it myself, and it's no easy task. And sometimes you feel like running, but if you overcome the fear like you talked about and have the courage to move forward, you'll be rewarded in ways you couldn't even imagine
Mhm.
beforehand. And um so with that being said, we talked about being able to forgive yourself and forgive others, and taking these first initial steps. And other so what would you say are some of the other first steps that people need to prepare themselves to do exactly these things?
So we already talked about a possible therapist or counselor. That in itself is going to be one of your biggest steps. If you don't want to reach out to something in that resource, then find a friend that you could honestly trust and open up with. Expression is going to be your first and biggest tool. I expressed verbally. I wrote in a journal. I cried about it. If I felt some anger surging, I would release it. I wouldn't hold it in. Sometimes I grab a pillow and start smacking my bed. I needed to move it. Sometimes I wasn't so bad, but just going and doing a workout, that was enough to move the energy out of me. We have to release the old stuff that's hindering us and holding us back. And that's through expression. When we express, we're going to start feeling lighter. We're going to have more space in our mind to start really focusing on what needs to happen. And then from there, getting resources. So you're going to want to start finding books to read. You're going to want to get in with workshops, something that's going to support you and start helping you move forward. Talking with somebody that's already been through it would probably be another big step, because then you've got a mentor right beside you. From there, when we start expressing, when we start having the clearer thoughts, we can start seeing the limiting beliefs, because we're hearing them now, because not everything is ruminating. It's starting to clear out. We're hearing, oh, you're not good enough for that friend, or you're not smart enough to write that test. And then when we start having the awareness of these thoughts, we can start taking action on them. So if we have a poor limiting belief of our intelligence, well, how do we make ourselves feel smart? We'll start doing things that bring out your creativity. Start giving yourself evidence that you are intelligent. If you feel like a poor parent, it's the same thing. Okay, well, what can you do today to be more loving, to show up differently? Just try one thing. You don't have to make your whole day about it. Just try one. And so when we start at the beginning, we go slow, because if we go too fast, too hard, we're going to quit cold turkey. You take it slow. You focus on one area. If it's confidence, if it's self-esteem, if it's body image, if it's intelligence, if it's emotional trauma, whatever you want to work on, choose one first. Seek all the information, start applying the tools and the techniques. Whatever resonates, keep doing it. Keep doing it, keep doing it. Watch for the evidence. That's the starting point. You have to create what it is that you want by recognizing what it is that's not helping you anymore. I have the limiting belief, I'm changing it. So when we start making that process, all of a sudden, those thoughts that used to come in that we're becoming more aware of show up, and instantly you're able to recognize them and reprogram them. So this is where really big change starts to happen, because now you're reprogramming the old thoughts for new thoughts. You're so aware of them coming in that you can change them in the moment they show up. So I had the same experience. All of a sudden, you're not smart enough for that promotion. I will seriously hear, you're not smart. I'm like, boom, I hear you. I'm done with that limiting belief. I know I'm smart enough. I have all the evidence and I'm going for it. And then I let it go. I focus back on the moment that I'm in and I move forward. And then the next one that comes in, I'm like, no, I'm conquering you and I'm conquering you. So it's a process to get to that point where you're recognizing everything, but it starts with letting it all out.
Now, in
That
your
was a lot of information.
that is, but that's what people need to hear. Because I guarantee you, they're out there. Where do I start? They can listen and go, yeah, that sounds good, but where do I start? So giving them that information gives them a place of a beginning, and now they can begin to move forward. So I appreciate that. With your build yourself back up system, I mean, how can they contact you? Like what is it that it does? Does it do exactly what you just said? Does it show them all these beginning steps, or what is it exactly?
It does. It starts getting them to recognize what it is that's putting them in the space that they're at, and then start pulling it apart and start healing it, and then start creating the foundation. So that's what I do. And I do it through writing and I do it through speaking and just showing them the way. And then once they start getting that going, it's all uphill from there.
So how would someone reach you to if they wanted to find out more about your build yourself back up system?
I'm on social media. So I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I also have a YouTube page. So they can reach out. My email is on all of the platforms. So they can reach me by email as well.
Okay, very good. And as usual, folks, I will always have the links listed below. So don't go looking for them while you're driving and stuff. It'll be here. So, one other question I want to have for you: when you discovered all this stuff, and you and your mother um, started to have this relationship that you now have, did she follow your steps? Did she take your advice in order for her to get there? Did she see that she was depressed when she was a little girl too? Did she see the things that she went through, and
Yes.
and realized then that she brought that into her adult life, and projected that onto her children?
She definitely recognizes the history and the cycle that just continued into her parenting. I wouldn't say that there was huge acknowledgement in regards to how it affected me. I think that we're still working towards that. I do know that deep down, she feels a lot of guilt and remorse for it. We haven't had really deep conversations about that at this point. That was actually what caused us to have a break in our relationship, was me pointing that out, and that really triggered and disturbed her. So we haven't gotten back to that conversation, but she has taken all of what I've done for myself and applied it to her life. And she's also added in her own stuff, right? And when we start getting into the groove of and learning who we are and how we work and move and talk and think and speak, we don't necessarily need outside sources anymore. We start figuring it out for ourselves. We start finding our own power, and our own intuition comes in and says, hey, try this, try that. And we start listening to the heart speaking. And that, when we get to that point, which is where I'm at, when the heart speaks and tells you go left, go right, go left, go right, you are in flow and everything starts working out.
Absolutely.
And that to me is when we get to that point and we get that inner guidance, we are just on our way.
I think that they need to go through the steps like you were talking about, so that they can have a good self-image and self-esteem, to be able to trust themselves. Because
Mm.
you're absolutely right. It's like with my system, what I teach, what I show people how to love themselves, there's going to be steps that I took that it may not be someone else's cup of tea. But at that point, when you've gotten to that point, you should have enough self-esteem to go, I don't have to do exactly the way Kurt did. I can do these other things that would work better for me, and trust themselves that it will, instead of doubting themselves and following someone completely. Because we all are different beings. We experience things differently. So when you get to that point, start to trust yourself, and believe in yourself, and you'll see, you will just like you'll blossom, and you'll be so amazed at what you're able to do. Things that you never thought were possible before.
Yes, absolutely. And then when you get to that point, you start recognizing that you can start helping others.
Yes,
Even if it's in your workplace, or even if it's in your community, or if you want to create a platform or a podcast, you start having this want and desire to transform other people. And I think that is what we are really here to do, is to co-create with each other, to help each other build ourselves back up and create what we really want this world to be, which is compassion, peace, and love.
exactly. And I think this is important for people to understand, to go along with what you just said. Look, you know, because Trish has her build yourself back up, because I have my, learn to love yourself course, there are going to be people who resonate with you. There are going to be people who resonate with me, and there's going to be people who don't. So
Mhm.
when I'm talking to the audience, when you go through the things that we went through, put your voice out there, because the people who may not resonate with us might resonate with you. There's, there's all different types of people out there, and there's going to be something that you say, or the way that you say it, where people go, I want to listen to more of what they have to say. Even Tony Robbins, who's probably the greatest, self-help guru out there are people who do not resonate with him. They don't like him. They don't, they may not even know why they don't like him, but they don't listen to him, and he doesn't, he's not their cup of tea. But I could go out there and say the same thing Tony Robbins says, and they go, oh, I like him though. And you may not even know why. So I'm with you. I encourage people to, that when you find your voice, give it to people and help other people. That's what this is all about, is is continuing to help one another, so that we can all heal and we can all be better, for for the process of
Mhm.
it all. So
Yeah, I agree. I think that everyone has value to give, but it depends what the story is and who's saying it that will resonate. Because there are mentors out there that I'm like, I get what you're saying, but it doesn't work for me. But this person does. And when we start having those realizations, we start recognizing what we need, what we are meant to have for ourselves, because we know what it feels like when things aren't in alignment or don't go down that path. When you start recognizing those feelings and you start navigating the path in a more direct approach, I guess.
you're absolutely right. So, Trish, I have to tell you, I've done over 100 shows now, and I am pretty positive this is the first one where where I teared up. So,
Oh, really? Oh,
so that's quite the accomplishment. So,
yes. Well, thank you very much.
well, listen, I really enjoyed having you on the show. I enjoyed your message, and the value that you brought to this episode, and with your advice. And I hope people, again, folks, I will have the links listed below on both the YouTube channel and the podcast, of course. And so go check out Trish, and if you're dealing with depression, um, or any of these issues, please check her out, and start taking the steps that you need to overcome this. Because, you know I can tell you a real quick story. I never suffered depression ever, until just recently. I had insomnia, and I don't want to get into how, because I'm not even sure how it happened. I just did. I was up for like 3 days with 2 hours sleep, and it started affecting my mind and how I was thinking. And I started feeling anxiety and depression. And I was like, holy cow, man, if this is what people will go through who have depression on a daily basis, I can see how what a struggle this is. And fortunately, my insomnia seems to have passed. I haven't had any bouts of depression and stuff again, and I hope to never have it again. But it made me realize just how powerful depression can be on people, and how debilitating it can be. So please don't, if there's a way, I don't care what it is. If I had depression, I would look and look and look until I found the answer that worked for me, to get past it, because I would never want to live like that. And I can only imagine how hard it is for those who do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's when you have that moment of reflection, it gives you compassion for other people.
Yeah. I always felt like I had compassion because, you know, I've friends who've dealt with it. And so, and these are people who are very dear to me. And I always go, but I never really understood it because I never felt it. Now I felt it, I have a better understanding. And now it makes
Mhm.
me want to find an answer for them even more because I go, I can't imagine what it's like to deal with this on a daily basis. And so that's why I said I love having folks like you on my show who have an answer that it might not work for everybody, but it might work for one of my friends or one of my family. And I can only say that would be well worth the time that I spent with you. So thank you so much.
Well, I thank you, Kurt. This was such a pleasure, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thank you. All right, folks. Well, after all that, so, seriously, I gotta go. Wash my face after this.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank everyone for thank you for joining us today. And again, go check out Trish on her social media. I'll have the links listed below. And if you are dealing with depression or you know someone that is dealing with depression, please send them her way. And maybe that what her words will be of some help to them and help them start on the path to a better life. So until next time, stay safe, take care, and love yourself so you can love others. Bye.